Hello, everyone. Welcome to Leprechaun Alley. My name is Carrie. Michael will not be joining us today. He's feeling a little under the weather. Listen, we go in and out of this. That's why we had to move the show a little later to make sure that I got through most of whatever I have to get through so I can stay in the show. um, but he's doing fine. It just, he has days where he's just exhausted. And it's the entire reason that I wanted to start this channel no matter what, that I'm always going to have him on video. So, so today, oh, and yes, I want to say thank you for joining us. I miss a few things because I'm always so nervous and I'm always kind of working with Michael to see which way he wants to go. Um, so thank you so much for joining us. There are many ways to spend your time, and spending it with us, we are really grateful for that. So thank you very much. Also, if you like what we're doing, please like and subscribe. And if you would like to have a personal private reading, please click on the link uh, in the comments below. We provide a combination of Western, terrestrial, and Vedic astrology. You can choose which chart you prefer to go with. Additionally, we have a quick service we provide for you, which is just your name seed syllable. It's based on the nakshatra and the pada at the time that you were born. So that's a quick service. If you want to do that, it's always good to have a little frequency and sound to help ground us and help us expand and connect to ourselves more. Additionally, I do have another program. I'm a licensed soul recovery coach, or a certified soul recovery coach. I think that's more accurate. This is a 12-week program. It's really the 12 keys to eliminating dependence, all dependence. It is a metaphysical program that helps us process all of the behaviors and the crazy thoughts and all of those things that that tend to be more self-destructive and aren't beneficial to us. So it's really a way to help us permanently and really fully learn how to forgive ourselves and live a more meaningful life. Okay, so getting started, the last sign we hadn't really talked about in terms of sadness or mood disorders. I really wasn't sure where this was going to go. It's always fun for me to just kind of bring something up and throw it at Michael, because Michael always has these interesting comments to make. And I was teasing him. I'm like, oh, you were really on fire the last show, so maybe that wore you out. So the sign that we didn't cover, really we're talking about sadness or depression. And by the way, this is for entertainment purposes only. So my commentary is not from the perspective of a doctor. I do have a degree in psychology. I've been around a little bit on the planet. I've seen a few things. I've known a few things. But this is just another way for us to take a look at each other and practice empathy and compassion, and kind of taking things apart and looking at really what the underpinnings are, instead of doing this, quick and jerky, knee-jerk reaction to when we see something going on with someone that's extraordinary. Because at the end of the day, even when we're dealing with different moods, different personality disorders, whatever that is, there's a great need that needs to be met. And no matter what we're looking at, the most important thing is for us to address that need and resolve it. And it's kind of interesting because we can be kind of punitive in terms of what we say, oh, yeah, they really need that. But when you really do the work and you really do the deprogramming, that need will reveal itself. And when that happens, that's when the help will really be effective. So we ended with Aquarius, and Michael had said some really interesting things. I happen to be a big fan of Aquarians. Well, I guess I'm a big fan of everybody. I guess you guys probably know that. um, but I definitely appreciate like Michio Kaku or even Vanessa Redgrave. She's an Aquarius, but she was born in 1937, but before the new moon, so she still goes in with the 1937 Aquarius fire rats. So those are some very interesting combinations, incredibly creative people. So, and they just have such unique ways of seeing the world, ways that some of us have to train ourselves to be, honestly. But now, moving on to Pisces, this is incredible. And by the way, we are here to do live astrology readings by request. So if no one is making a request, then I'm just having conversations about whatever comes to mind. So please don't be shy and you just give us your day of birth and year. Okay. So Pisces, gosh, now I just kind of, so this is Pisces. It's represented by Jupiter and also Neptune on the higher octave. Um, Obviously in Jyotish, we don't particularly use Neptune, but I've actually found it very helpful, and that's why I've also really been interested in watching Joni Patrice presentations as well. She's similar to me in terms of what I discovered as well, although she's had a lot more experience. Um, so we're dealing with yoga. We're dealing with union. Pisces corresponds to Year of the Cat, and there's somebody on who is currently Year of the Cat trial now, Johnny Depp. We've been kind of talking about him off and on, but he's a Gemini, not a Pisces. So when I think about sadness with Pisceans, what I think about is how deep it goes, how global it is, how much information Pisceans really take in and take on and try to connect and unite together. It represents illusion, right? That Neptune, the ocean, all of that. Everything is in one place. And right, and that kind of, it's the 12th house, it shores up the zodiac. So of course, what we're going to do is, when we've graduated or made it till the 12th sign, is look over our lives, look at the illusions of our lives, look at everything we've experienced, look at everything we know about ourselves. And we're going to want the fog to lift. We're going to want that to move. And also for me, I'm thinking about this as well, right as it's coming up in the conversation, because it's really fun to share with you, to share the experience with others of asking a question and looking at the sign and saying, oh, yeah, that is an interesting way to look at it. So, what's important about Pisces is illusion. They It's been my experience for the most part that Piscean people can actually handle disappointment very well. They're not the big life disappointments. That's If they're going to be crushed, it's going to be on a grand scale. Civilization itself, uh, the value of life itself has really, found them at a crossroads, found them maybe around people that don't seem to have enough respect for other human beings, or being incredibly misunderstood, or not having the opportunity, because Pisceans tend to come up with humanitarian solutions like at the drop of a dime, because it's always What's always going on is this constant yoga in the mind, and internally as well. So you might see when, right, there's a little Cinderella situation that goes on in here too. There is a little theater. When you um, experiences of oppression, there's often a story of someone who's been underappreciated or taken for granted involved in here somewhere. And of course, Cinderella, she starts out in tragedy. She starts out in the sadness. Her father, both of her parents are gone. And at the end of the day, she ultimately finds a way to solve the problem of her grand love without mistreating anyone. So for Pisceans, it takes a long time for them to go into full-blown despair because they're always trying to problem solve. They're always trying to come up with a solution. Um, and well, this is more, and I'm looking more in the realm of sadness because um, there are other disorders and personality disorders that we can talk about that I would say may come up with a Pisces. Um, but I would say, yeah, I mean, especially the water signs, all of them are really prone to they're well, because they're feminine, because they are a receiver for information, because their purpose is to take all of that feedback and organize it and properly interpret what events are unfolding. They're, very spiritual. Even if they say they're atheists, you're, when you hear what they get upset about and you hear what they value, when they're upset, it has a very solid spiritual quality to it, even if they don't think so. The Scorpio wants decorum. It has to be done the correct way. You have to speak with people correctly. You have to treat them with respect. That's really important. And why is that? It's because this is the other thing. For water signs, speaking to them correctly, speaking to them with respect, that's how how do I want to say it? That's how they make decisions about what they're going to do on this planet, what their purpose is on this planet, what comes next, who needs what has to happen. And there's a purification process to information that comes in as well. So when we're at our best, when we're kind of at the ideal with water signs, you have this system of input and reflection that tells you a lot about what's going on in personal situations, sometimes, in a global situation, in war. It's pretty extensive. I would say Pisceans, just everybody, when they're in a state of profound sadness, we should also know, they tend to, like in the DSM-5, I always say, for like major depressive disorder, the first symptom should be major asshole, really grumpy. And I'm not making fun of it because I have been through my bouts You go through quite a bit when you face health issues and things aren't quite going the way that you originally thought they were going. Um, I would say though, Pisceans really good at overcoming. They're really good at overcoming their dilemmas. They're really good at overcoming their emotional issues. They're really good at overcoming conflicts in the family. They're very solutions driven people, and where it comes from, I mean, and right when then there is, we always say too, like with the year of the cat, because it does correspond to month of the cat. Year of the cat, people like to be in charge at home. They like to have order. They like to have everything run a certain way. So this would also be true. They want to see results. They want to see resolve. They don't want to be rushed to do anything rash. They don't want to be rushed to judgment to make decisions. While at the same time, Pisceans are very clear about their positions, very clear about their morality. And most of the Pisceans I've known in my life, if something isn't going right in front of them, if they see somebody being injured, they respond immediately. Their values are intact in such a way that they just want to reach out and offer something and do something. So, and of course, they can become selfish. They can become materialistic. That's kind of what you're going to see when a Pisces, when they start going into some sadness and depression. You may see more of a sort of a bitchiness and a grasping of material things, and also maybe a little bit of being super tight with their money, like they won't spend anything, or being going overboard and blowing it all. I've definitely seen both. And for me, it looks like there's just this, right, because I always think of like the infinity sign. I'm always thinking of union and the yin yang and all of that. There's just something that clearly objects to being told who they are or what they do. They know what their right and compassionate thing is to do, or the right and compassionate thing is to look at in the situation. I mean, right now, in the Vedic sky, what we have going on, oh my God, we got our butts kicked. Whew, Kali Sarpa Yoga. But what we have going on in the Vedic sky is Jupiter's actually conjunct Neptune in Pisces, with the Venus also there. But so we're right now, what we are seeing is we're starting to come up for air a little bit. We're coming to the top of the ocean now. We're finally rising. Uh, Certain things are being exposed. Collectively, we more strongly desire to be more peaceful, to be more compassionate, to be more accurate. That's actually a scorpionic thing as well. I would say precision in one form or the other is important for the water signs. Um, they all they in different forms, they can get hung up on things. It might be the Cancer might be upset about the principle. It's the principle, and then the Scorpion might be more, that you must speak to them correctly. You just don't be dismissive and insensitive and cruel. Don't talk down to them. So yeah, so something similar with Pisces. If you talk down to a Pisces, for example, what they'll do is they'll go back into they'll go back into themselves And they just have a way of finding a way of getting around it. It doesn't affect them personally. It doesn't like they just have other ways to tie things all together so they can overcome that and come out on top. But they're not particularly not so much in the competitive realm, but in terms of justice and spirituality and empathy. So yeah, so mostly like what you're gonna see, I would say you're gonna see maybe a little spending, uh, or like I said, somebody who stops being generous emotionally. It's pretty drastic. I would say Pisceans definitely have a tendency to isolate, but they also like to spend a lot of time alone. And I can appreciate that because we all have to protect our energy and we all have different ways that we do this. So they need that time to dream, they need that time to connect with themselves, to connect with the earth, to connect with the sky. They definitely I would do that. And this is also a very hardworking sign. They can kind of appear to be lazy sometimes. You'll see some, you're like, whatever, man. Once they get involved with something, once they get involved with a craft, they're very hardworking, and you almost kind of have to remove them from the situation, like force them to get some sleep, give them a sleeping pill or something. Uh, so yeah, definitely, if they feel deeply about something, they're gonna work overtime to take care of it. So yeah, so in terms of if you want to make a Pisces feel better, bring a kid around, bring an animal around, take them to a petting zoo, um, tell them about something wonderful that's going on, that they don't completely despair um, about some situation that really upsets them. That's that's pretty much it for them. Uh, because you have to talk to the individual, and we have to get into their chart. We have to look at their chart. So there are a lot of ways to kind of look at how what do I want to say? I don't even like calling it I don't like calling mental illnesses mental illness. I don't mind the disorder uh description as much because that's what it is it's all a disorder. It's disordered. um what I'd really like to see is a grassroots organic effort of all of us just digging in to being human and resisting the urge to knee jerk judge other people, to maybe change one thing, one automated response that we have to something and go, wow, that's not really coming from a place where I really want that, where I really want to go. That's not really who I am. That doesn't really reflect how I want to see this play out. So, and at the end of the day, of course, all of the disorders, with exception of really the cyclothymia and schizophrenia, they're all shaped by the culture. So we may not we may not know we, what we have to do is look at full societies and look at the way that they deal with people who they would classify as not being adjusted or adapted to their social system, to their social network. So I wanted to kind of take a look now. Mm, I wanted to look at, uh, huh, I thought, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to read, I have a list of personality disorders coming up here. And I'm just going to kind of look at some of the symptoms. It's so interesting. Looking at the cluster A personality disorders. So, what it is cluster A personality disorders are characterized by odd, eccentric thinking or behavior. They include paranoid personality disorder, schizoid personality disorder, and schizotypal personality disorder. So, immediately, what I think about in all of this right away is I think about solar and lunar eclipses, and I think of the South Node or K2 in Jyotish. And then I think about, hi, welcome. Now I'm going to put my glasses on. Oh, 4 Pi GM. Great to see you. Thanks for joining us. Well, thanks for joining me anyway. So, so the first personality disorder, and if you have any requests, any astrology readings you would like us to do, just share your date of birth and year, and that's what we'll do. Or in the meantime, we're just kind of talking about different ways to view the planets. And this particular personality disorder, and this is primarily something that occurs in Western civilization. The first one is a paranoid personality disorder, pervasive distrust and suspicion of others and their motives. So, unjustified belief that others are trying to harm or deceive you, unjustified suspicion of the loyalty or trustworthiness of others, hesitancy to confide in others due to unreasonable fear that others will use the information against you, perception of innocent remarks or non threatening situations as personal insults or attacks, angry or hostile reaction to perceived slights or insults, tendency to hold grudges, unjustified recurrent suspicion that spouse or sexual partner is unfaithful. You know, honestly, a little persecution paranoia, we all have a little bit of that. So definitely we're not looking at something that's just like, why is it always me? Why is it it's when we're talking about persistent, it really is an endless communication, an endless preoccupation with who is this person? They look like a person that could do this kind of thing. No, that's, if there's something that even slightly reminds me of some other experience that I affiliate with danger, that's what's going to come up. That's what we're going to see. So when I look at that, I can go back to Aries now and even look at personality disorders or personality or disorders in general. Paranoid personality disorder. Maybe some of us could joke and start with, we could say that, like the Scorpio might have a persecution complex, or the Year of the Pig person might have a little bit of a persecution complex. But what's interesting is that they m- they may have a belief, an order about certain things. So there so I could say, possibly something happened, where the Scorpio had been afflicted in some way. You have, like, the moon in Scorpio, which is me in the 12th house. Like, either deal with it or don't. That's the only choice you have. Um, you can see that maybe Saturn might be making a hard aspect, but the persistence is, I would imagine, actually, now when I think about that and the pushiness, so there's gonna be, I would think, a lot of Martian and moon energy that we would be looking at. So there's the defensiveness and the trigger and the anger. There's going to be something going on with Mars. Maybe Mars is making. Maybe it's conjunct. Maybe it's conjunct the moon in the sixth house, for example. It's being aspected by, what could I say? Say, what, the moon in the sixth house, and it's making a, maybe Saturn is square Scorpio. Maybe it's in opposition. Could be making a hard aspect. Uh, Other things that we might look at, though, is Jupiter's a planet of expansion. So we can deal with, anything interesting can happen with a combination of Jupiter and Mercury, for example. We're also looking at electricity, um, different modes of communication. So I don't know. I would throw Mercury in the mix when we're looking at a possible personality disorder. You can, when you see, for example, when you see a Gemini short circuit, I'm so sorry. It's, by the way, I'm not throwing you guys under the bus. So when you do see a Gemini really short circuit, you do see a lot of things that aren't lining up, that aren't connecting, that aren't making sense. Of course, they're pretty docile people, actually, and that typically doesn't last very long if it happens, but they do. Mostly it's stress. Mostly it's because they're driving themselves crazy with thinking about what they like and they don't like at the same time. Um, so, but there could be some type of, gosh, it's so interesting, the persistent paranoia. For anything persistent, for anything long term, Saturn has to be involved in some way. It just does. It's it's sort of like the greatest planet, in the sense that Saturn is what tells us that we need to discipline ourselves in this earth walk to grow spiritually. Saturn is key to that. It's so important. We need that. That's what the planet's for. Um, but then, of course, we also have the experience that it creates delays. It can create separation, and the planet by itself, anywhere that it's placed, could just straight up be an indicator for issues with depression. So the thing that's interesting about this, though, is that if we're going to be looking at the mood disorders or the personality disorders, quite honestly, we can look at them astrologically, kind of put some things together, kind of get a sense of order. But these are things that those individuals oftentimes don't even know that they have themselves. We all know when we feel sad. When you get into those, that's why they're persistent, right? When you get into these personality disorders, they're very treatment resistant. Um, and there's just a lot of things that aren't communicating or corresponding with each other the way that in a way that would make it more harmonious and more balanced and more stable. I'm hoping it's always been in the back of my mind. I'm hoping that we will come up with a process, we will come up with procedures that really will help people rapidly get through and process uh, those type of disorders or those types of psychological issues. And there are a whole bunch of ways that people approach this. One of those is nutritionally. There's a lot of really interesting information out there. Um, what is it? Glutathione, really important for the brain. Um, and I know actually the best way to take it is still as a suppository. Dear God, I know you'd think 2022. Yeah, it's still a great way to take it. It's really good, especially for in memory disorders, and good for detoxifying metals from the body. Um, and I also think that we have changed the way that we deal or the way that we look at mental disorders, personality disorders, and many of us have become far more forgiving and open and receptive. I remember, especially like in the 80s and the 90s, I was born in 1970, so I couldn't remember before that. Or maybe I do, I just haven't remembered yet. Um, Everybody was like a pop psychologist. Everybody was like kind of well, and the 12-step program had long been underway, and that's still been really quite a phenomenon in our culture. And by the way, that actually came from the Theosophical Society, the entire 12-step program. And the whole spiritualist movement really started in the late 1800s, and psychics and that whole phenomenon really became appealing and came to the United States and started that whole movement. And of course, with Madame Blavatsky, um, Rudolf Steiner. Rudolf Steiner's a Pisces. Yeah, and oh, what happened to him? They still think he was poisoned, and because what an incredible mind this man has. You When they're on, you can't shake them. There's just no way to shake them. When the Pisces knows, they know, and there's no way to make them unknow it. So if you don't want if you don't want someone to solve your problems, don't talk to a Pisces. um, but yeah, so there's this whole spiritualist movement, and the way that I thought it was interesting too that Bill W took these 12 keys, these 12 metaphysical principles, and applied them to Alcoholics Anonymous. It was nothing short of miraculous and incredible intuition. The whole purpose of us being here is to make more discoveries. I should really look at what year he is. That would be interesting. Bill W. I wonder when his belly button birthday is. Do a quick look right now and see. But anyways, so talking about like the 80s and the 90s, a lot of pop psychology, a lot of people were reading about psychology and thought they could read people when they went to parties, all of this nonsense, if you guys remember. Those of you who are old enough to remember. And I remember thinking to myself, obviously that's why I had to go to school, but I just remember thinking to myself, it's all so strange. It makes no sense. And it doesn't seem that well, the results didn't match the confidence levels at that point in time. We had a lot more to learn. And I really do like that we started out well, the spiritual movement, right, also occurred. There's actually a bunch of planetary aspects. I should bring that up and discuss that more because there's a lot going on. So the spiritualist movement, um, obviously, psychoanalysis, Sigmund Freud, the beginning of psychology. Not really the beginning of psychology, because anybody that's read the Mahabharata or the Upanishads or the Gita, anything like that, you already know that we've already had psychology incorporated into our culture. Um, but so we have a rising civilization, so they have to have their own new discoveries and answers, right? That's we need an ego, we need all of that to get the civilization to materialize. So I thought that was that particular point in time, the late 1800s, the spiritualist movement, the beginning of psychology, it really did inform the way that we started addressing the mind, the way that we viewed the mind, and shaped the research that we've done and the way that we view other people. What I think is so interesting, though, is that with all the research they did, they really didn't get things up and moving until the 70s when they started looking more in terms of, which was actually really awful, but started out for good reasons, in terms of placing individuals in the community, teaching them how to live independently. They deinstitutionalized a lot of people and as a result left them homeless. But the reason that it had started was that there was a new approach to the way that we deal with mental disorders and disabilities. So the thing is that when it comes to the mind, when it comes to, again, we're dealing with subtle processes. When it comes to those things, it does take a, a program, a devotion, a period of time for us to be able to commit and remain focused on healing and recovering. So, huh, I was thinking, okay, the paranoid personality disorder, I'm trying to think of how that would look for an Aries. I mean, I may have hit the max for how far we can really take this, but I would say trying to imagine what that would look like. I don't know that what that would look like for an Aries, what I would imagine anyway, is they ultimately may not have faith in themselves or their abilities. They're very fast thinking, they're very fast acting. So there may be with them, there may be a tendency to, well, I always joke, I say, they shoot first and ask questions later. So there may be a tendency to be in a situation where that's really not ideal to shoot first and ask questions later. And so for them, it would be very difficult to talk them out of their perception of what that experience is. So I think we're just dealing with that's interesting. We're just dealing with pure warrior energy here. And pure energy, just energy in general. So I can't really I think about this, I can't really visualize an Aries being particularly paranoid, but I'm just speaking pure Aries. But I can imagine them yeah, but I can imagine not being able to talk them out of it. They're so for them, it's almost like you have to like back into you'd have to deconstruct the event and what they did. I mean, it's true for everyone, but the order in which it would happen. I found what makes Aries reachable is if they're in the middle of doing something physical, like they're out in the yard, they're gardening, or like let's say you're working out together, but doing something physical, it's almost like a form of meditation for them. And that's a really good opportunity to have a conversation about changing their mind because their energy is more grounded and more tangible at that given point in time. And you can say, hey, is it possible maybe we could look at this way? So, of course, now listen, I'm not going to say that they're going to receive that well right away, but you can take many opportunities to repeat that again to show them again that the situation didn't really play out the way that they thought. And once you do that, then there uh, lots of Aries people they're more like, no thanks, no thanks. Um, and I feel like it's almost like Aries people don't really they're very passionate people, but it's like almost they don't really have like these desires long term. It's everything is like temporary and quick. And the desire manifests for them because of the consistency of who they are. That's just how they are all the time. So they half the time they don't even know what they're creating, but they're creating something, and it ends up many times being beautiful. Taurus, that's interesting. I would even say just talking about paranoia in general, because the personality disorder is almost like when you get into that, you almost need to be in an institution of individuals and know their signs and study them and have their charts in front of you. But I would say, interesting is the moon is exalted in Taurus, but here I could definitely see the Taurus is the first sign really with the material. It's about manifesting, it's about beauty, it's about comfort. And there's a way that Taurians read the world and interpret it through this lens of beauty and comfort. So the way that if you're not them, then you don't really know how they always how they think about things. So I would say if paranoia was an issue for them, it would be based on fear of there not being material comfort. Um, and you know the thing, safety is important to them too, but it's sort of like it's month of the snake. And so when you think about the snake in terrestrial astrology, this is also somebody who is patient, they're opportunistic, they wait for the right time to act, the right time to do something. So when they have a fear that someone is trying to take advantage of them, yeah, it's more along the lines of their material comfort is being threatened. Um, and that they're going to be put in a position where they're not going to be able to overcome, um, or that somebody wishes them harm or ill, and then they're not going to be able to overcome this lack of comfort, the lack of opportunity. So yeah, so material things would be very important, and I would imagine that would be sort of one of the things that they would be having a conversation about in terms of that. When people hurt them or mistreat them, which makes me very unhappy, they have they have a way of working around that. It's because they're patient. Um, they'll find a way to overcome it. They'll figure it out. And right, and it's a fixed sign. So on top of everything else. But if you mistreat them for long periods of time, this is less than the paranoid. But if you mistreat them for long periods of time, you're going to ruin a Taurus. That it's just going too long and hurting their soul like that. That's what's going to be hard for a Taurus to come back from. They took responsibility. They gave you their best. They waited it out, and it's just not happening. It's just not working. So yeah, and so what would that look like in terms of paranoia? See, if you did a Taurus ascendant versus a Taurus sun, how else would we oh, definitely again here I'm even thinking of eclipses. What it could be happening is there's just information that they just for some reason aren't able to process or access some input that they aren't able to process. So the best thing for us to really do is understand that they mean well and they want everybody to be comfortable, including themselves. But yeah, that can be tough when you injure a Taurus. That's rough. um, and there you can get some of the paranoia, some the fear of change, the fear of trying something different. Uh, Gemini, a paranoid Gemini. You know, this is what I, or not a paranoid Gemini, but a paranoia in a Gemini, or I could say that I could attribute Mercury to a state of paranoia because it rules communication. So you never know. Mercury can be conjunct a solar eclipse or something like that in someone's chart, lunar eclipse. It could be there could be a major planetary period that they're passing through when something gets triggered. Um, this is where I'll see people being avoidant. This is where I'll see where they really do need to change their environment. Um, they have an extreme mistrust of the environment that they're in. And because they have this beautiful, mutable mind, that's when you're going to start seeing them. They'll be more aggressive, they'll be more hostile, they'll be more unpredictable. They may just not answer the phone, like, they'll just hang up on you. You will see some interesting I know it sounds terrible. We're talking about something that's painful, but it is interesting. So you'll see some very interesting erratic behavior from someone with a the Gemini, or the Gemini is afflicted, somewhere along those lines. So, I'm sure actually I'm so sorry. Um, I'm actually going to have to end. So we're at the top of the hour. Thank all of you so much for joining me or watching the show and hanging out with me. We will be back 2 p.m. Wednesday afternoon. As always, all our love and travel light.